He didn't raise his voice. He didn't fight back. But when a white woman dragged him out of his first-class seat, spilled hot coffee on his clothes, and told him, without shame, that he didn't belong there, something inside him went cold. Two flight attendants stood between him and the seat he had paid for. They never looked at his boarding pass. Not once. They looked at his skin, his hoodie, his silence. Around him, phones were lifted. Whispers spread. Judgment filled the cabin like poison. In that narrow airplane aisle, Darius Coleman felt the familiar weight of being black in a world that decides your worth before you speak. He could have ended it instantly. He chose not to, because what was about to happen next wouldn't just expose one woman. It would shatter every assumption in that plane and force an entire system to face a truth it had been avoiding. Stay, because something shocking is coming. Darius Coleman had learned long ago that silence could be louder than anger. He stood in the narrow aisle of the aircraft, his shoulders nearly brushing the overhead bins, the hum of the plane vibrating beneath his shoes. The smell of brewed coffee still clung to the air, mixing with the faint scent of leather from the first-class seats. Just moments earlier, he had been sitting calmly in seat 1A, his assigned seat, scrolling through unread messages on his phone. Now that seat was no longer his. "Get out of my seat," the woman had snapped. Brenda Collins' voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, practiced, confident in a way that came from never expecting to be challenged. Her manicured hand had grabbed his arm without hesitation, her nails digging into his sleeve as she yanked him upward. Coffee spilled across the newspaper in his lap, splashing hot liquid onto his jeans. Passengers gasped. Phones appeared almost instantly. "That's better," Brenda muttered as she dropped into the seat, smoothing her blazer like she'd reclaimed stolen property. Darius didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. He simply stood there, holding his boarding pass between two fingers, watching the moment unfold like someone observing an experiment he already knew the outcome of. He had seen this before. Not this exact setting, not a first-class cabin with soft lighting and quiet luxury, but the assumptions were always the same. A black man dressed simply did not belong here. Brenda crossed her legs and glanced up at him with thinly veiled contempt. "Some people forget where they belong," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. A few heads turned away, others leaned in. The flight attendant arrived quickly. Her name tag read Lauren Hayes. She offered Brenda a concerned smile, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, are you all right?" "I'm fine now," Brenda replied. "But this man was sitting in my seat." Darius stepped forward calmly. "This is my assigned seat, seat 1A. He held out his boarding pass. Lauren barely looked at it. Her eyes flicked instead to his hoodie, his worn sneakers, the way he carried himself. Not unconfident, but not performative either. Her expression shifted subtly, almost unconsciously. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," she said. "Economy class is toward the back." Darius blinked once. "Could you please check my ticket?" Lauren's tone hardened. "Sir, please don't make this more difficult." That sentence landed heavier than the shove. Behind them, whispers grew louder. A teenage girl a few rows back lifted her phone and hit record. Someone else did the same. A ripple of discomfort moved through the cabin, but no one intervened. Brenda smiled, satisfied. "I fly all the time," she said. "I know who belongs in first class." Lauren nodded, grateful for the reinforcement. "Exactly." Darius felt the familiar pressure behind his chest. Not anger, not fear, but something colder. The weight of being seen not as a person, but as a possibility of trouble. He tried once more. "Please, just look at the boarding pass." "I don't have time for games," Lauren replied. "We need to depart." She stepped between him and the seat. That was when Thomas Keegan, the senior flight attendant, arrived. His posture was authoritative, his expression already set. "What seems to be the issue?" "This passenger refuses to move to his assigned seat," Lauren said, emphasizing the word passenger as if it were an accusation. Thomas looked at Darius once, just once, and the decision was made. "Sir, you need to take your seat in economy immediately." Darius extended the boarding pass again. "I am in my assigned seat." Thomas didn't take it. Instead, he sighed, clearly irritated. "We don't have time for this. If you don't comply, I'll have airport security escort you off the plane." A hush fell over the cabin. The word escort was familiar to Darius. He'd heard it in boardrooms, in hotels, in stores where he'd spent more than the employees earned in a year. It always meant the same thing. You don't belong, and we can remove you. Brenda leaned back comfortably. I have a connection to catch, she said. This is ridiculous. More phones appeared. The live stream counter climbed. Comments flooded in. That's racist. Why won't they look at his ticket? This is messed up. Darius glanced at his phone. Missed calls, urgent messages, a reminder flashing quietly at the top of his screen. He ignored them. Instead, he looked around the cabin, at the people watching, at the ones filming, at the ones who looked away. 5 minutes to departure, came the captain's voice. Thomas spoke into his radio. Security requested. Brenda clapped her hands softly. Finally. 2 more crew members arrived, forming a half circle around Darius. Noah Whitfield stood behind him, blocking the aisle. Patricia Monroe crossed her arms, her gaze cold. You're delaying an entire plane, Patricia said quietly. Make the smart choice. Darius felt the air tighten around him. He could end this now. One sentence would do it. One reveal. One name. But that wasn't why he was here. He looked at Brenda, then at the crew, then at the phones recording everything. His voice remained steady. I'd like security to come, he said. The words unsettled them. Security arrived moments later. Officer Andre Lewis and Officer Hannah Kim stepped onto the plane. What's the situation? Officer Lewis asked. This man refuses to leave first class, Thomas said quickly. He doesn't belong here. Officer Lewis turned to Darius. Sir, may I see your boarding pass? For the first time since this began, someone asked instead of assumed. Darius handed it over. Officer Kim examined it carefully. Her brow furrowed. This says seat 1A. The cabin went silent. Brenda laughed nervously. That can't be right. Obviously fake. Officer Kim looked up slowly. Ma'am, that's not how we determine authenticity. Officer Lewis glanced at Darius, then back at the crew. Why wasn't this checked earlier? No one answered. Darius met Officer Lewis's eyes. There was no triumph in his expression, only resolve. This is just the beginning, he said quietly. The cabin held its breath. Before you continue watching, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone judged, not by what they showed, but by how they looked? And if you were on that plane, would you have spoken up? The silence inside the cabin didn't feel empty anymore. It felt heavy. Officer Hannah Kim still held the boarding pass between her fingers, rereading it as if the paper might change its mind. Seat 1A, first class, name, Darius Coleman. Everything about it checked out. She looked up at Thomas Keegan. This boarding pass is valid. Suckworm, Thomas's jaw tightened. That doesn't make sense. Brenda Collins laughed again, but this time the sound cracked. Come on, anyone can print a piece of paper. Officer Andre Lewis shifted his stance. Ma'am, please lower your voice. What? Brenda snapped. You're taking his side now? Andre didn't answer. He turned back to Darius. Sir, can you confirm your ID? Darius nodded slowly. I can. He reached into his pocket, deliberately, calmly. Cameras zoomed in. The phone's recording trembled slightly as people leaned forward in their seats. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. But instead of pulling out his driver's license, Darius paused. His phone vibrated again in his hand. Another message. Another missed call. He looked at the screen briefly. Then he locked it and slipped the phone back into his palm. Before I show you my ID, he said, voice steady, I'd like to understand something. Thomas exhaled sharply. Sir, we don't have time. I was sitting quietly in my assigned seat, Darius continued, not raising his voice. I showed my boarding pass 3 times. No one looked at it. Instead, I was told I didn't belong. I was threatened with removal, with handcuffs. His eyes moved slowly from Thomas to Lauren to Patricia. I want to know why. No one answered. Brenda crossed her arms. Because you're causing a scene. Darius turned to her. I didn't touch you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult you. He gestured toward the aisle. You grabbed me. Brenda's face flushed. You're twisting things. A man in row 2 spoke up. He's right. She pulled him out of the seat. Another voice followed. They didn't even look at his ticket. The dam was cracking. Lauren's cheeks burned. We followed protocol. Andre Lewis raised an eyebrow. What protocol says you don't verify documentation? Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it. Patricia Monroe stepped forward. We're trained to identify passengers who may not belong in premium sections. There it was. The sentence hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Darius nodded slowly, as if he'd expected it. Based on what? Patricia didn't respond. Andre turned to Officer Kim. Run the booking in the system. She nodded and tapped into her tablet. The seconds stretched. 1,000 quiet judgments formed in the cabin. Brenda leaned closer to Thomas and whispered, This is ridiculous. You're letting him embarrass us. Thomas swallowed hard. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. Officer Kim looked up. The booking is confirmed. First class. Purchased directly. Brenda shook her head. That doesn't mean anything. People upgrade all the time. Darius finally spoke again. You're right. They do. He took a breath. And sometimes people assume they don't deserve it. The cabin went still. Andre handed the boarding pass back. Sir, at this point, you're free to return to your seat. Brenda's head snapped around. Excuse me? Andre turned to her. Ma'am, you're currently occupying a seat that is not assigned to you. Her mouth fell open. This is insane. She stood up abruptly, wobbling for a second as the plane seemed to tilt beneath her. You're really going to let him? Ma'am, Andre said firmly, please gather your belongings. Brenda's composure shattered. Do you know who I am? Darius met her eyes for the first time since the confrontation began. No, he said calmly, but I know who you decided I was. That landed harder than any insult. Thomas cleared his throat. Sir, Mr. Coleman, perhaps we can resolve this privately. Darius looked at him. You had several chances to resolve it quietly. The live stream numbers surged. Thousands, then tens of thousands. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read. This is exactly how it happens. They always assume. Hold them accountable. Brenda stood frozen, clutching her purse like a shield. I didn't mean it like that. Darius didn't respond. Instead, he unlocked his phone. The screen lit up, not with messages, but with an interface few people in the cabin recognized. Menus layered over menus, access panels, corporate dashboards. Officer Kim leaned closer, eyes narrowing. What is that? Thomas asked. Darius turned the screen toward him. Thomas's face drained of color. The clipboard slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Lauren gasped softly. Patricia took a step back. Andre looked over Officer Kim's shoulder. His expression changed instantly. Not fear, not surprise, but recognition. He straightened. Sir? The entire cabin sensed the shift before they understood it. Darius lifted his eyes, his voice calm but unmistakably firm now. My name is Darius Coleman, he said, and I'm not just a passenger. Brenda stared at him, confused. What are you talking about? Darius didn't look at her. He addressed the cabin. I own a controlling stake in Skyward Airlines. The words didn't land all at once. They rippled, slowly, like thunder heard from a distance. No, Brenda whispered. Darius turned his phone so she could see the screen. Her face crumpled. That seat, he continued, is reserved for me when I fly. The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas sank into the nearest seat. Lauren's hands shook. Patricia looked like she might faint. Brenda's knees buckled slightly as she stared at the leather beneath her, suddenly aware of how heavy it felt, how expensive, how not hers. Andre Lewis stepped aside instinctively, giving Darius space, not because of power, but because of presence. Darius exhaled slowly. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, he said. I came to see how people are treated when they don't look the way you expect power to look. His gaze moved across the cabin. And now, I've seen enough. The plane didn't move for a long time after that. No one complained. No one checked their watch. The cabin, once charged with judgment and tension, felt different now, quieter, heavier in a thoughtful way. The kind of silence that follows a truth people weren't ready to face. Darius Coleman finally returned to seat 1A, not triumphantly, not smugly, but with a measured calm. He sat down slowly, placing his phone on the armrest beside him. The leather felt cool beneath his hand, familiar. personal. Brenda Collins was escorted to her assigned seat in economy. She didn't protest this time. Her shoulders were slumped, her earlier confidence stripped away. As she passed through the aisle, eyes followed her, not with cruelty, but with clarity. She had been seen. Thomas Keegan stood near the galley, pale and rigid, staring at the floor as if it might swallow him whole. Lauren Hayes wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to steady her breathing. Patricia Monroe leaned against the wall, arms wrapped around herself, finally understanding that experience without empathy meant nothing. Officer Andre Lewis spoke quietly to Officer Hannah Kim as they finished their report. When he turned back to Darius, his voice was respectful but human. "Sir, I've seen a lot in this job. Not many people use power the way you just did." Darius nodded. "Power doesn't mean much if it only protects the people who already have it." The captain's voice came over the intercom, firm and sincere. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize for what you witnessed today. What happened on this aircraft was unacceptable. We will be delaying departure to ensure the situation is handled properly." No one objected. Several passengers began clapping, softly at first, then louder. It wasn't applause for drama, it was recognition. Darius stood once more, turning toward the cabin. He didn't raise his voice, but it carried. "I want to say something," he began, "not as a CEO, not as an owner, but as a black man who has spent his entire life being asked, sometimes politely, sometimes violently, to prove that he belongs." The cabin listened. "I didn't dress down today to test anyone. This is how I dress when I travel. Comfortable, quiet, invisible if I want to be." A pause. "But invisibility doesn't protect you from bias. It invites it." He gestured gently toward the crew. What happened here wasn't about one person. It was about assumptions, about how quickly dignity disappears when we think someone has less power than we do. Lauren looked up, tears streaking her face. "I was wrong," she whispered. Darius met her gaze. "Yes, you were." The word wasn't cruel, it was honest. "But wrong doesn't have to be the end of the story," he continued. "It can be the beginning of change, if you choose it." He turned back to Thomas. "Leadership isn't about enforcing rules. It's about protecting people." Thomas nodded slowly, shame etched into every line of his face. Darius took a breath. "Effective immediately, Skyward Airlines will be implementing mandatory bias accountability protocols for all customer-facing staff. Not performative training, real oversight, real consequences." A murmur moved through the cabin. "There will also be a passenger advocacy system," he added, "so no one ever has to stand alone in an aisle again while people debate whether they belong." Brenda, seated several rows back, lowered her head. Her hands trembled in her lap. Darius paused, then addressed her. Not loudly, not publicly. "Ms. Collins." She looked up, eyes red. "I won't pretend this didn't hurt," he said. "But I don't believe humiliation creates understanding. Accountability does." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I didn't realize." "That's the problem," Darius replied gently. "You didn't think you had to." The plane finally began to move. As it taxied down the runway, something else moved too. Something unseen but powerful. A shift. A recognition that this wasn't just a story about a seat or a flight or even a company. It was about who gets questioned and who never is. Who gets the benefit of the doubt and who has to earn it every single time. Later at cruising altitude, Lauren approached Darius's seat hesitantly. She didn't speak right away. "I want to learn," she said finally. "If there's any way to make this right, I want to do better." Darius nodded. "That's all anyone can ask. But remember, doing better means listening even when it's uncomfortable." She nodded deeply. As the plane descended hours later, sunlight spilled across the cabin, soft and warm. People talked quietly now. Some smiled at Darius. Some simply met his eyes and nodded. Respect doesn't always come with words. When the plane landed, the applause returned. Not loud, not performative, but steady. Darius stepped off last. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. "Before you leave, let me ask you something. How did this story make you feel? Did it stay with you? If this story moved you, comment 111 below, so I know you felt it too. Tell me, What country are you watching from? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be seen, please share this video, because silence protects bias, but stories can change it.